Two directions pulling at once. Not a comfortable position, not the kind of situation that resolves itself cleanly or quickly or without asking something significant from the person standing at its center. And if you are here, if something in you responded to this reflection before you had fully decided to, then you may already know somewhere beneath the part of you that prefers clarity and order and things that make straightforward sense exactly what kind of energy this is speaking to. There is a particular kind of person who finds themselves in this dynamic, not because they sought it, not because they orchestrated it or invited it consciously, but because there is something in their presence, something in the quality of their attention, the depth of how they engage, the specific frequency they carry that tends to register with people in ways that ordinary presence simply does not. You may not always see this in yourself. In fact, the people who carry this quality most genuinely are often the last ones to fully recognize it. But it is visible to others, sometimes uncomfortably so. Let's talk about what it actually means when two very different energies are drawn toward the same person simultaneously, because this is not simply a situation about attraction. It is a situation about contrast, about the way two fundamentally different ways of moving through the world can both find their way through entirely different paths to the same point of gravity. Water moves differently than fire. This is almost too obvious to say, and yet the implications of it in the context of human connection are worth sitting with carefully. Water is patient in a way that fire is not capable of being. It finds its level gradually, persistently, sometimes almost imperceptibly. It does not announce its depth. It does not make dramatic gestures toward what it wants. It simply moves steadily and without apology in the direction of what draws it, and it keeps moving long after other forces have exhausted themselves. The water energy in your orbit right now may not be the loudest presence. It may not be the one that announces itself most clearly or pursues most visibly, but it is consistent in a way that, if you have been paying attention, you have probably already noticed. There is a steadiness to it, a reliability that does not depend on mood or momentum or the right circumstances aligning. It is simply there, present in the quiet moments as much as the significant ones, attentive in ways that don't always call attention to themselves. And beneath that surface, beneath the patience and the quiet and the steady, almost unassuming presence, there is a depth of feeling that most people never get to see, because water does not offer its depths to everyone. It reserves them for the people it has decided, through its own slow and careful process, are worth trusting with something real. You may be one of those people. And if you are, what is being held beneath that surface on your behalf in the private interior of this person's experience may be considerably more significant than anything that has yet been expressed directly. Fire is an entirely different conversation. Where water is patient, fire is immediate. Where water moves quietly toward its destination, fire announces its direction with everything. It has light, heat, energy, and unmistakable presence that is impossible to ignore and difficult to look away from. Fire does not hint. Fire does not wait to be certain before it moves. Fire feels something and responds to it in real time, without the careful deliberation that other energies might employ. This is exhilarating in a way that is difficult to overstate. There is something about being seen clearly and wanted directly, without games, without ambiguity, without the exhausting subtext of feelings that are never quite brought to the surface, that can feel genuinely, viscerally alive. Fire reminds you that you are someone worth pursuing, and it does this not through careful words, but through the unmistakable heat of genuine desire. But fire also burns, not always intentionally, not always in ways that are easy to anticipate. The same intensity that makes fire magnetic makes it capable of consuming things faster than anyone planned. The same directness that feels so refreshing in contrast to silence and ambiguity can, in certain contexts, leave very little room for the kind of gradual, layered intimacy that actually sustains connection over time. This is not a criticism of fire. It is simply the nature of the element, and understanding the nature of what you are dealing with clearly without the distortion of either excitement or resistance is the only foundation from which any real decision can be made. Now, here is where this reflection moves into the territory that most people, if they are being completely honest, find the most uncomfortable. You are the point of gravity in this dynamic, not a passive observer, not simply someone to whom things are happening, the center around which two very different energies are currently orbiting. And that position carries its own complexity, because there is something seductive about being wanted, not in a shallow sense, in a deeply human sense. The experience of being pursued, of being someone that another person organizes their attention around, of mattering in the specific and personal way, that genuine desire implies this touches something real in almost everyone, something that goes back further than any individual relationship, to the most foundational questions about worth and belonging and what it means to be seen. For someone with Virgo's particular quality of energy, the precision, the perceptiveness, the tendency towards self-assessment that is sometimes generous and sometimes not, the experience of being genuinely, clearly wanted can carry an unusual weight, because there is a part of this energy that has spent considerable time cataloging its own perceived shortcomings, its own areas of insufficiency, its own distance from whatever imagined standard of deserving feels perpetually just out of reach. And then someone looks at you, really looks with the specific attention of someone who has noticed you clearly and decided without reservation that you are exactly what they want. And something in that carefully maintained internal architecture of self-assessment simply stops for a moment. And in that moment, something much truer than the catalog gets to breathe. Both of these people are offering you that moment in different ways, with different energies, through different textures of attention and desire. And the question of what to do with that, how to navigate it, what it means, what it is asking of you, is not one that this reflection is going to answer for you. But it is one worth sitting with far more carefully than the noise of the situation might otherwise allow. Let's talk about what you actually want, not what makes sense, not what is easiest to justify to the people in your life who have opinions about your choices. What you actually, privately, genuinely want. Because here is something that Virgo energy sometimes struggles with in ways that are worth naming directly. the tendency to analyze a situation so thoroughly, to turn it over so many times from so many angles, to consider every implication and counter implication so carefully that the analysis itself becomes a way of avoiding the feeling, of keeping the actual unmediated, pre-logical experience of want at a safe intellectual distance. It is a sophisticated avoidance strategy, so sophisticated that it often doesn't even register as avoidance. It registers as being thoughtful, as being responsible, as being the kind of person who doesn't make impulsive decisions based on feeling alone. And there is genuine value in that quality. It protects, it prevents certain kinds of damage, it keeps you from being swept somewhere you didn't intend to go by a current you didn't examine carefully enough. But it also sometimes keeps you standing at the edge of something that genuinely deserves your presence, mapping its contours from a careful distance, running through scenarios and contingencies while the moment itself continues to move and the people in it continue to wait, and the actual experience of being alive in this particular configuration of possibility slowly shifts into something that was rather than something that is. The mind is extraordinary at building cases for caution, and sometimes caution is exactly what a situation requires. But sometimes, and you probably know somewhere beneath all the analysis, whether this is one of those times, what the situation requires is not more thinking. It is more honesty with yourself first about what you feel when you set down the framework. And simply notice there is one more dimension of this that deserves attention before this reflection closes. Two people in your energy simultaneously means that you are being asked implicitly to make a choice. Not necessarily immediately, not necessarily in an explicit or formal way, but a choice nonetheless about what you value in connection, about what you are ready for, about who you are willing to show up as in a relationship, rather than simply who you have learned to perform. And that choice, when it eventually clarifies itself through whatever process it takes to get there, will tell you something important. Not just about the situation, and not just about the two people orbiting your energy, about yourself, about what you have grown into without necessarily noticing, about the version of connection your interior life has been quietly preparing for, even during the periods when it seemed furthest from reach. Some people, when they find themselves at this kind of crossroads, discover that what they thought they wanted and what they actually want are not quite the same thing, that the familiar draw toward a certain kind of energy, however comfortable, however known, has quietly lost its authority, that something in them has shifted enough to recognize a different quality of resonance, a different depth of alignment, a different sense of what it means to feel genuinely, sustainably at home in the presence of another person. Others discover that what has always drawn them still draws them, but with a new clarity about why and a new awareness of what they are willing to offer in return. Not just what they want to receive, but what they are ready to actually bring. Either discovery is valuable, neither is wrong, and neither is one that can be reached by analysis alone. At some point, the map has to be set down and the territory has to be entered directly, with all the uncertainty and aliveness that entails. Two people are in your energy right now, both real, both significant in their own way, both reflecting something back at you that is worth understanding. The question that matters most, underneath all of it, is not which one to choose. It is who you are choosing to become and which direction, when you are finally honest enough with yourself to feel it clearly, actually moves toward that.